this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in.
Welcome to Yoga Snack. Here we are. We're on our first remote podcast in separate locations. How fun.
I know, right? We're giving this a go. I'm going to be traveling in December, so we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to keep recording and bringing you quick little bite-sized nuggets of wisdom, even through the holidays. So what are we going to talk about today, Robbie?
Today we're going to talk about the Yama Ahimsa.
Ahimsa, yeah.
Nonviolent.
Yeah, non-harming. So in yoga philosophy, there are 5 yamas and 5 niyamas. And the yamas are like the don't list, like the do not do this list. And then the niyamas are the do list. And what it is it's they're observations. It's like a code of ethics and morals and a standard that we work on and hold ourselves up to. And in the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga, in Patanjali's yoga as well, the first limb are the yamas. The second limb, the 8 limb system, the second is niyamas. And then the third limb is asana. Now, asana is what we've come to know in this very popular pop culture yoga culture environment as yoga. So when I say I'm going to yoga, we actually mean we're going to an asana class, most likely. So what I find interesting, and I always like to bring up in trainings, is that the yamas and the niyamas come even before the movement. And I think it's important that we really have this internal work that we're doing in our own space and trying to cultivate and excavate how we're doing, and that this gives us a framework. So the reason Ahimsa is first is because it's important. And in the sutras, anything that's mentioned first is given priority. It's like, this is the hardest thing to do. And if you can just get this right, you don't need anything else. But guess what? It's super hard. So then we're given all of these other things that we also get to work on. So if we could just get Ahimsa right, which is incredibly hard to do, we would be able to, advance our practice and find that more blissful way of being human. But it's difficult, right? Because yoga is actually asking us to look inside first. And typically what I find and what I found in my journey so far is like, I am probably one of the most harmful people to myself. That my mindset, my inner dialogue was super toxic, and it's something I'm constantly working on. I'm much better at it than I was before, but yoga wants us to go inside first. And when you hear that, like non-harming, non-violent, I'm like, I'm not a violent person. Are you a violent person, Robbie?
I wouldn't say so, but
right.
You don't hear, so you said, you don't hear what's going on inside my head.
Exactly. So like the surface of it, right? That surface meaning and that surface understanding, if we just stay on the surface of it, we're like, I got that. I'm not a violent person. But really the harm that we do a lot of times is silent. And even, the harm that we do to others can be really silent. And that's what the yoga philosophy is inviting us into. So we're going to talk a little bit today about Ahimsa and our journey individually around it, how we understand it, and how to practice it. Because I even think the asana practice, if we're not careful, if we're not paying attention and bringing awareness to our practice, our asana practice can actually be harming us. I think because the yoga asana practice has been lumped in with the fitness industry, that there's a lot of punishment mentality that goes into when we move our bodies. And so that whole no pain, no gain is a really short-sighted, unhelpful guide when we're trying to care for ourselves. Um, so that's what I want to start with, because we're both yoga asana teachers, is kind of exploring what is non-harming. What would that look like in an asana practice? And um, what's been your experience, Robbie, with this Yama?
Well, like I alluded to, that constant inner dialogue. mm, When it's unchecked, it's not very kind. Um, it kind of feels sometimes like that's maybe my natural inner dialogue. Like it feels like that's my natural state, is to come down on myself, um, for any various thing. And I don't know. I think um, it's not it's not like it's an easy thing to get over. Like you can't just be like, oh, now I'm gonna start being nice to myself, because it like creeps in when you least expect it, or even when you feel
Right.
like you've done the work to eliminate that. It sort of um, creeps its way back in,
Mm. That's why
and
we have, that's why we establish practices, right? Because, even neuroscience has confirmed that our minds default to the negative,
Mhm.
right? And that sort of unhelpful beating up that we do of ourselves. But also, have you ever deluded yourself into thinking something that wasn't true? Like trying to be like toxically positive about stuff. Like that's also harmful, right? That it kind of goes both ways. And if we're not practicing and we're not like sharpening and honing our tools of perception and awareness, then they're dull, and they're not tools really that are going to be helpful in our lives. And that's why having a practice that we come to um, isn't just about moving our body, but our mindset is everything, And when I teach, if you know me or you've taken class from me, I do sometimes I'll really hone in on alignment. And the alignment isn't about getting it right. I'm putting that in quotations for those of you that can't see, like the getting it right on the outside of the pose. Um, it's about paying attention, and it's about caring for, intending, and taking accountability for your physical body during practice. You know what you're doing. And it has less to do with, you know, being precise in the way of like looking for an aesthetic of the pose. And it has more to do with that accountability that we're taking of our own bodies. Because a lot of times, we're just sort of handing that over to the person in front of us, and they're like, step your right foot forward, or, open the right knee out to the side. But what if you do that and you follow directions and it hurts? Don't you want to have some kind of sovereignty over your experience where you can really find and know that you're valuable enough to validate your experience so that you're not harming yourself? But I think it comes with awareness. If we don't even know what our feet are doing when we're in a pose, how can we know how to kind of steer that experience? Um, I have a sweet potato in the oven really quick, and it's going to harm it and burn it if I don't take it out. So I'm going to walk away for a moment, Robbie, but I want you to continue this line of thought around
Yeah.
yoga posture and ahimsa. Be right back.
Okay. No problem. This is some of the fun parts about doing the remote podcast. So, um, I think even for myself, over the summer, um, I think I got very fitness minded, and was really pushing myself in that way. And I think sometimes your body's very resilient and can start to adapt around the amount of activity you're doing. And it wasn't until, um, summer started to end and I started to slow down a little bit and I'm like, oh shit, I'm like dog tired. I'm like, I'm like dragging. Actually, I don't feel like that I'm actually, um, excelling. I'm dragging my feet a bit.
Mhm.
And, it took that little bit of like pausing for a moment to realize, oh, I think I'm actually like hurting myself
Mm.
by pushing myself so hard. I had like foot pain and things like that. And like you would
Mm.
think a yoga teacher would be able to be like, oh, foot hurts. I should probably calm down. But the mind is just like, no, I think you can do it. Like it'll loosen up. It'll be
Just
all
keep
right.
going, loser.
Just keep going. Yeah. Like if you don't run on the treadmill today, I mean, what's that mean about yourself? You know, that's
Right.
the type of stuff that like comes up.
Yeah.
And I think it's just learning that that is not the actual truth. Like you can make accommodations for yourself
Yeah. And that
without it being a
there's,
larger commentary on who you are as a person.
yeah. And it's funny because it goes both ways, right? Like if we just don't do anything at all to tend and care for our bodies, that's also, right, a form of harming.
Right.
That if we don't, find ways to care for and move our bodies and nourish our bodies consistently, then that's also, just as detrimental as overdoing. And it's like, well, how do you know then? Right?
Right.
How do you know? Well, that's what the yoga practice, that's why it's called a practice, right? We're practicing over and over and over again. Hopefully, if you have a consistent practice, but we're practicing over and over again, becoming self aware. We're calibrating our nervous system. We're embracing challenge. We're noticing, how our breath feels, when our muscles burn. Sometimes those are positive adaptations and we can learn to stay longer. But other times we're just bone tired and we can dial
Well,
our practice back with that self awareness. But if we're just going to, put our head down and plow through, because that was my tendency, um, you know, it's over time, it can be detrimental, but there is something valuable about showing up and doing things again and again and again. But it's tricky, right? It's not this
certainly.
formula that you're going to be able to apply in every day of your life and every circumstance of your life. But what you have to do is start to hone that skill of discernment so that then what is the best way. Because I mean, I do strength training a couple days a week, and like my mind really would just like to talk me out of it a lot.
I'm
But
familiar.
um, you know, but I also know how good it is for me and my body at this phase of my life. It's really important for women over 40 to be strength training regularly. And um, my body loves it, but my mind is the one that gets in the way. And I try and I have that little internal argument with myself too, because I'm like, but the body loves it. And my mind's like, oh, aren't you tired? Or oh, this isn't our favorite thing. Wouldn't you rather do yoga? Just go sit in the steam room. Like, all this stuff will come up. And I'm like, but my body, like if I listen to my body and I still my body really enjoys that feeling of stability inside of it. And it feels good to be alive in my body. But my brain just has all of these like preferences, and all of these criticisms and judgments, and it really murks the water.
Yeah.
And the yoga practice, as we're advancing and we're practicing over and over again, it's like kind of straining that water so that it's a little easier to see through and we can discern it. It doesn't mean you're like going to be perfect about it, but what it means is like you're getting better. It's not as confusing, it's not as limiting. And then, if we're not able to be truly kind to ourselves, can we really truly be kind to others?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Every time I hear that, I think of RuPaul. You know, RuPaul.
Uh-huh.
RuPaul says something along the lines of like, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love anybody else? And it's like
Right.
that same thing. And I think that was a big part of my teacher training was honing in on that first Yama Ahimsa, like the amount of like even as a baker, like to eat a cookie and be like, and now I got to do this amount of exercise to counter that. That's
Right.
not just enjoying it to enjoy it. That's like making a wager with yourself. Like
Yeah.
if
Now you
you
got to
do
punish
this, now
yourself
I
because
have
you
to do,
enjoyed it.
yeah,
Mm.
right.
I
And
think
I
that's so
think,
common.
yeah,
I was like that for sure too.
yeah,
And it's a practice because you're not just like going to wake up one day and decide not to think like that because your thoughts have
exactly.
been with you for a really long time. And there's pathways inside of our thinking that we're going to go there, but we have to start to like build in new pathways. But we can only do that with self awareness. And that has to be done regularly. Any change that we make in our lives, it's like being able to do it over and over and over and over and over again. But it can just be little tiny increments. Um,
Right. You
when,
think, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I don't know, and I'm 37, and to think like all the years where I was cementing a certain pattern or thought pattern, and to think that like you're gonna take a couple yoga classes and that's gonna go away. It doesn't work that way. It's like the amount of time you've spent cementing one thought, it kind of is probably gonna take that amount of time to cement another thought, another way of thinking.
Yeah.
It's gonna take that practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to think it's going to take half the time
There we go.
if
Yes,
you're practicing regularly, right? Like if you have something, like if you're committing to this ability to like wake up, and it doesn't have to just be yoga as, the technology. You can, you know, there's lots of other modalities that carry that. But I just think that that rewiring of the thought processes is really hard work. And you again, it's put up front. Like if you could just not harm, if you could just get that right, right? Then, wow, what an amazing, way to be in the world. Um, and I sometimes people get hung up on this, on ahimsa, and they kind of go towards diet, and that they think like not harming animals and things like that. And I always back way away from that conversation right at first with someone because I think it's important that we get right inside of our own hearts and our own heads first, as far as how we're treating ourselves, because it becomes a distraction. We think we're doing it because it's outside of us and we're making all of these, the ways that we are in the world. And I'm not saying that that's not important, but I'm like, we got to go inside and get it right first inside so that we're really examining that and trying to find that as a path in a way that we're living in the world. But we have to become a safe place to land our own selves. And I I teach a class sometimes where I'm talking about becoming a safe place to land. And a lot of times what happens is that like we walk into a yoga class and we like walk in the studio, excuse me, and it's like beautiful and lovely, and we're like, oh, and people are nice, and you're going to enjoy the movement and all this is happening. And so the yoga studio right, becomes a safe place. You're like, oh, and your nervous system can map that, and people are kind, and right. And that's kind of like the first phase. And then all of a sudden, like every time you roll out your yoga mat, then you hear that like that that texture of the yoga mat unrolling, and your nervous system is like, oh, it's time for yoga. And you could do that in your bedroom. You could do it on vacation. You could do it camping. You can do it in the yoga studio, right? But that like enrolling, and your nervous system hears that, and your mat's like, I got you, and it's like becomes a safe, it then is the safe place to land, right? And so we're going from outside to inside because that's just how we do it. And then you end up practicing and really doing some excavation. And ultimately, you are supposed to be a safe place to land. Right. And that has to do with our mind and our hearts. And we have to all start where we are. Right. And so coming to yoga class, right, that's probably the beginning of it. It's like for a lot of people, that's really scary, and to go in and to know that you, feel good, that people are kind. Hopefully that's your experience. If you haven't had that experience, I'm so sorry. But that studio, even you'll smell maybe they have essential oils, or they, smudged, or, just the smell of the studio, your nervous system goes off. But from there, that's just the beginning. And we don't actually come to our yoga mat and to a yoga practice and to a yoga studio just to like check out and be all like blissed out. It's to become a safe place to land so we can do deep excavation. I always say like yoga is actually confrontational.
Yeah.
It is not about checking out and being blissed out, because you can spiritually bypass with this Yama as well, right? Like you're just like not gonna harm anybody and anything, and not even being able to like speak our truth and stuff like that. That's harmful to us. Our body keeps that registry inside of us, and so it's creating um, a safe space inside of yourself that no matter what happens to you outside, that you can come back home inside, and that you are a safe place to land. And that's profound. You can go to another country if you need to. You can, go anywhere at all and know that at the end of the day, you're going to land in a safe space because that's what you've become. And that's really what my goal as a teacher and even as a practitioner. I think I'm definitely a yoga student first and then a teacher second, but that's been my realization after these years is like, wow, um I've become a safe place to land. Like I can come home to myself. I'll still beat myself up. I'll still, say things to myself, or I'll be unreasonable, or I'll have doubts. And some of that's just the part of the human thing. But at the end of the day, I know that I can be truly kind to myself and not harm myself. And that means being real. It doesn't mean be an asshole and justify it. Like be accountable, and that's the thing. It's like, I always ask clients too. I'm like, how do you know? Are you being lazy, or are you just exhausted? It's a great
Yeah,
question, right? How do you know?
it really is.
They
Yeah.
look the same, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah. I saw something yesterday where it was an athlete who was like, and the quote was something along the lines of like, you're not tired. That's just your mind telling you that you're tired. And it is like that, like, is that true? Or does your mind also need a break? And how do you walk that line? And
Yeah.
I think it just comes back to that, like continually, like you said, coming onto your mat and finding these things out along the way, like just
Yeah.
feeling it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because our yoga mat is like a microcosm. Like it reveals you will show up in all of your glory on your all of
Yeah.
your neuroses, right? That tendency to push through and over effort will show up. The tendency to check out quickly or to tap out quickly, or to give up, or to think the teacher's being mean, or that everybody's doing better than you, or that, like X, Y, and Z. And that's what I mean by confrontational. Our yoga practice should be confrontational. It should shine a light back into those parts of us that we have a hard time looking at because the outside of our life is so busy and so noisy. And that's good, deep work. It's hard. And then if we learn, so like my tendency, especially at the beginning of my yoga practice, my yoga journey was like really to push, and I need to move. I am a kinesthetic person. I need to move my body. But there was a point in time where not only was I moving, but I was teaching a tremendous amount of classes. And it was like ridiculous between acrobatic dance and yoga, and I have my 4 kids, and and I was still keeping my practice intact, and my body really started to hurt. My back started hurting, my body, and here I'm doing this thing, and I'm this person who is supposed to like get it right, kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like, here we are, yoga teachers, we're all just
Right.
messed up. Like, we're just on a path together. Like, we're
Wow.
studying, and that's what we're doing, is we're studying ourselves. And sometimes we get a little bit better at being human. Oh, speaking of, let's all be better humans. Oh, I didn't even mean
Love
that.
that.
That's my shirt today. It's election day, so I needed my shirt to say that.
Beautiful message on a day like today.
Right. Yeah. But we just, it's this process of coming in and noticing and being aware and allowing ourselves to have grace when we need grace. And so what I had to get really clear with was that I needed to take care of myself in other ways if I was going to keep doing what I was doing as far as teaching and all of this other stuff. And that's actually going way back, but that's where I started doing some strength training, because I was really I really wanted to keep practicing and teaching yoga, and I loved teaching, and I wanted to keep teaching, dance as well. And so I had to do something different. Otherwise, I was just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And that's what I mean is, like, if we're paying attention, we're going to have to pivot constantly in our lives and shift in ways to help take care of ourselves, so that we're truly still caring and tending to ourselves lovingly. And it's not always about doing less. That's what's really important. Like, self-care and this whole self-care like wave that we're on, it's not like bubble baths and
Sure.
and bonbons. I mean, it can be, but sometimes it's like meal prepping
Right.
and strength training and having a hard conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, if you don't have ways of like confronting your tendencies, how are you ever going to shift those tendencies so that they're benefiting you?
Right.
That's why we need that consistency.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always shifting, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's a
always
moving
like,
target.
yeah, what is true today isn't true tomorrow, and that's tough. It's a tough,
Yeah. Yeah.
tough
So
way to
what do
move it.
you
You got to be
do?
fluid with it.
Yeah. It's like, but that awareness and that discernment that a practice can give you, that's the superpower. Right?
Oh.
That's the thing that's going to change you, so you can make decisions moment by moment on how to adjust and adapt.
Yeah.
Um,
Usually when I say I love structure, I love to like formulate some sort of schedule or plan and go after it. And about the time that I like always like this is my method, and that's when it shifts.
yep.
At the
Yeah.
moment I like this is what I do, and then
Yep.
I do the complete opposite of that for a
Yep. And I thought, like, I thought at some point there was going to be like this formula that I would follow for the rest of my life, and I would never have to think about it again. Right? That we're just find this formula, whether it was diet or exercise or relationships or creativity or, career. And like there was going to be this formula that was going to create that result that I was looking for. And really, we have to cut ourselves a break. We have to stop telling ourselves things like that
Yeah.
and know that really the the way to be a skillful human, that's actually the invitation of yoga, is to be more skillful at being human. To be skillful takes practice, just like anything. I mean, even like, baking and anything at all, like to be more skillful, it actually takes you to practice and to study and to do things again and again and again. Um, my initial entry point into strength training was CrossFit because that was the only thing that was available around me at the time that I could fit it in. And I would go at 5 a.m. twice a week. And what was so interesting though is when I entered that, thank God that I had already had a really long term yoga practice, not just, I'm not talking the physical practice, but that I was able to approach that and see that that was an act of self-care, that I was there to take care of my body. I wasn't there to shred my body. I wasn't there to compete with other people. I wasn't there to prove anything. I wasn't there to, X, Y, and Z. And so that was really important because I'm actually quite competitive. My nature is pretty competitive. And I didn't want to go in thinking that I needed to prove something. And so I really, every day that I would go to those training sessions, I was very clear with myself, like, this is an act of self-care and I'm going to be reasonable and I'm going to take my time and I'm going to learn good technique. And I'm going to, take this slow and use this as a way to learn about myself and to strengthen myself. And, that's one thing that I do. I do things over and over and over again. And I was very consistent about going, but I would take my time. And even though it was frustrating, I wasn't always building a lot of strength, if I compared myself to other people. But I also never had to tap out because I was injured and not come for a month or two.
Right.
Right. And that's where I was like, oh, I'm actually taking care of my body and I'm able to show up consistently because I'm listening to what I need. And, and I mean, it wasn't perfect about it. There were a couple of times, that I could point to and go, that I probably overdid that, and so we also can't beat ourselves up. We're just like, oh, I'm going to get better
Mhm.
at it. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that there's probably people who love CrossFit and I got a lot of value out of it. I actually had a really good trainer. She was amazing. Um, and but there is sort of that mentality of like punishment and like work out till you puke. And I'm like, oh, no, thank you. And I would be with people who do that. And that is not in my wheelhouse. No, thank you. I'm
Mhm.
not interested in that.
Yeah,
So
I had like high school wrestling friends growing up. I didn't do that myself. My dad was a wrestler and I had friends in high school that were wrestlers, and just hearing some of the stories that they would tell me, it sounded like all harming. Like
yeah,
sleeping
keeping
at night with
weight.
trash bags on, like to cut weight. Like it's just the stuff
Yeah.
that we do that we think that we have to do to excel. It's
Mhm.
just a
And
little
and
misguided
it's
sometimes.
yeah, and it's funny because like I have such admiration for people who are so disciplined and are athletes and excel at their sports, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like, where is that line? Where do we, look at somebody and admire them for their dedication, their talent, their work ethic, their drive when it comes to being great at something? But underneath it all, if we're doing it probably to prove something like our value as a human being, that it's going to short circuit us at some point, and
Yeah.
that's at the end of the day. You see people who are super successful, have everything that they want in life, and they end up harming themselves in
Yeah.
really dramatic ways. And so that internal world that we cannot see, but we all know is there and it's tormenting us.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we start to work with that? And um, I have a mantra that is so simple um, that I use. There's an artist. Her name was Nightbird. She passed away, but she was on America's Got Talent. She sang this really beautiful song, um, and it was called "It's Okay." And um, I hear that song in my head. I'll sing it to myself in my head over and over and over again when something is going on that typically I would go down that deep dive of like shaming myself or beating myself up in a way that I wasn't just trying to hold myself accountable, but it was, it's like that excessive tormenting that we do to ourselves. And so, um, do you have anything that you go to, Robbie? Is there anything? Because the song is like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Everybody gets lost sometimes, and and I just repeat that, it's okay, it's okay, and I even to myself, I'm like, it's okay, baby, it's all right, we got this, girl, we're gonna be all right, it's fine.
Yeah.
We got to do better, but this is, or whatever it is. Do you have anything?
Um, no, I don't know that I have like a specific uh like song or mantra that I go to. I think I don't know what I do. I'll have to pay attention to that more.
Yeah,
Like what does my mind actually do when I get into a
yeah,
situation like that where I'm starting that negative self-talk
yeah.
or things aren't
Stage
going
one
the
is
way I
to know
plan.
you're doing it right. And
Right,
that's
yeah.
huge. And I think because it took me probably 12 to 15 years to be able to intervene and shift stuff. So stage one, that's for everybody, right? It's like pay attention, know when you're doing it. We may not be able to undo it, but know that you're doing it. I'm beating myself up right now, or whatever it is that we say, or I'm being harmful to myself right now, or you know and then I think phase two, it's like, how are we going to intervene and start to shift so we can create new pathways of thought and care and non-harming. And we can't just stop beating ourselves up. It actually has to be replaced with something else. One, we have to know we're doing it. Awareness is everything.
Yeah.
And then two, um, it's not stopping it, it's doing something different in place of it. And then that gets louder, and then that other tendency gets softer. It's not, I don't think it ever goes away. I think it's probably always there. It's just not quite as loud. And then
Right.
that other more positive um, way of treating ourselves becomes more of the standard.
Yeah.
So maybe
I
that's
think
that's that's a great contemplation this week for everybody. Do you have a replacement? And I think it has to be simple and something we believe.
yeah, I think my go-to is to usually like find some humor in the way that I'm like how ridiculous I'm being towards myself. Like, oh, why are you being so hard on you? Like I try to like laugh about it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that might also come off as like sarcasm towards myself or something along those lines. So
Yeah.
maybe, yeah, I think examining that and like how that self-talk starts to come up or some of those
Yeah.
harmful traits, like what is your initial reaction?
Yeah. I had a lot, I still do, like I said, nothing ever, I think, completely goes away. That's a neuroses. But a lot of body image issues. And I heard a podcaster talk in an interview and saying that she refers to her body as she and her. And so even being able to treat my body in that way, it's like, what does she need right now? What do you need right now, baby? What do you need? How do we, and being able to listen to our body, because our mind has all these thoughts, but our body has an intelligence too, that normally our mind is so loud and so obnoxious that we don't even have the ears to hear what our body's actually asking for. And that's, I think, another, interesting contemplation that folks can take away from this podcast. And because I pulled my sweet potato out of the oven, I'll tell you my recipe really fast.
Oh, great.
I'm going to make sweet potato. I'm going to make breakfast sweet potatoes for dinner tonight. So BFD, breakfast for dinner. I
Love
roasted
it.
my sweet potato on parchment paper. I washed it. I didn't even use oil or anything. I poked it with a knife a few times, stuck it in at 400 for an hour. And then tonight when I get home, I'm going to scramble eggs and put cheese in it and all the fixings like chives and just cilantro and maybe some
Mm.
sour cream, and just make it a breakfast um, baked potato with a sweet potato though. So that's my food contribution for this. Do you have any other embellishments to that, Robbie? What would you do?
To the sweet potato?
Yeah, what else?
Ooh,
What would you put on yours?
ooh. I think you nailed all the essentials. You gotta have the cheese. Um, the did you say scallions? Like
Yeah.
onions or anything like
Hmm.
that?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think cheese and onions. That's where and sour cream. I feel like potatoes, and I'm a Midwest person, so
Yeah.
we're
But
we're
would
big
you,
into
you could
potatoes
do
and
like
cheese.
do bacon in it or something too. I don't eat, um,
Yeah,
yeah, no.
yeah. No, I I do like a pinto bean or a
Mm.
black bean down in there. That's a
Oh,
nice
yeah.
substitute for a bacon bit, I found.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it
Oh,
gives
and
a little
butter, of
bit more,
course.
and butter,
Butter.
yeah.
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 Big slab of butter goes in there.
Yes. Yeah.
So, well, I think we'll probably continue on the Yamas and the Niyamas. And I hope you guys are enjoying this. We'd love to know what you want to learn more about. And thank you so much for tuning in. And
See
see
you
you
next
next
time.
time.